The final battle of Season 1. Clash of the Nishizumis. Two sensational prodigies, two highly skilled commanders, albeit with teams under them who couldn't be more different, have their long-awaited clash. And it's everything we could have hoped for and more, in terms of how they each approach the match and how it plays out from a tactical standpoint. Brace yourselves for a video as long compared to my usual videos as the mouse was compared to pretty much any of the Oarai tanks, since there's quite a bit to dive into here. This week's video is brought to you by my coming original manga Amaranth Angels, cute anime girls, starfighters, and exciting space battles in a fun space adventure. Written by a Girls Und Panzer fan, for other fans of Girls Und Panzer and the military mori genre in general. The full first volume will be out later this year, and I now have a pre-order store live for anyone who missed the Kickstarter campaign. Now, on to the video. As one would expect, the final battle of Season 1 of Girls Und Panzer, between our main characters from Oarai and the undisputed scariest team in the league, Kuromoromine, is by far the biggest, both in terms of the numbers and size of the tanks involved, but also in terms of just how much went into this fight in an in-universe sense. As I mentioned briefly in my first video talking about this battle, this is easily the most dynamic battle thus far in the series, given how much space it covers, how it ebbs and flows, and how the tide of battle changes multiple times as each team jockeys for a more advantageous position and adapts to their opponent's plans. Obviously, spoilers ahead for the battle, and by extension all of Season 1. But if you're watching all my battle analyses and still haven't watched the show yet, what are you doing? So, very quickly after the battle starts, in blitzkrieg fashion, obviously also referencing the rapid German advance through the Ardennes in early World War II, Kuromoromine takes the early initiative, taking Oarai by complete surprise. We don't know for sure whether this is standard Kuromoromine doctrine, or if Maho chose this opening move based on the terrain and knowing that Miho was also schooled in Nishizumi style. But it works almost perfectly, and it's only thanks to the inexperienced anteater team struggling to control their tank that Erika failed to take out Miho's right then and there. Now, some might term this sequence of events plot armor, which I don't agree with for a couple of reasons, but I'll cover that broader issue in a future video. But also, given all the historical references we've seen throughout the show, this is likely not a nod to a singular event, but rather to the seemingly random chance things that sometimes happen which can alter a battle's outcome. There are always factors that could upend the best laid plans after all. Fortunately, after this, Miho and the rest of Oarai are able to relatively quickly regroup and reorganize as they escape the ambush by moving into the forest themselves, and getting out of the open area. Episode 11 is really where the battle takes off, however. The initial hectic skirmish is over, and the plans and counterplans start to come into play. Almost immediately after losing Anteater Team, Miho has the rest of her group activate smoke screens, a tried and true tactic for troops under fire that's still used today. In this case, it serves a few purposes. Obviously, it makes the Oarai tanks harder to hit due to the concealment, giving them a chance to regroup and reposition without being constantly bombarded by accurate heavy fire from their larger, more powerful opponents. Additionally, due to the nature of Senshido, with each tank only having the ammo on board and no way to rearm, every shot wasted in the smoke is one more shot that tanks can't use in a more effective manner later on, which is precisely why Maho countermands Erika's order to fire blindly into the smoke. This is the difference between Maho, a calm, focused, level-headed commander, and Erika, who, at this point at least, is more rash and impulsive. Maho also better knows who her opponent is, and is thus obviously going to take this seriously. Although Erika's firing into the smoke with the machine gun after this isn't a bad play, since it could allow her to locate the tanks in the smoke, to then potentially direct cannon fire. Wasting machine gun rounds here really isn't an issue, since they're not going to do any real damage to tanks in almost any scenario. Maho also demonstrates more understanding of her opponent's forces here, as she doesn't expect Oarai to get far, due to the slow and poor climbing Porsche Tiger. Except, Miho's ingenuity really comes into play for the first time here, when we see that the other tanks, tethered to the Tiger, manage to get the whole squad up the hill much faster than anyone expected. And at the same time, Miho has two of her tanks deploy yet more smoke, to buy them even more time to get to the advantageous high ground.
I have the high ground!
While also keeping the enemy's full attention there. While Maho's tanks are able to clear some of the smoke with explosions from their high explosive shells, Oarai's plan does succeed here, allowing them to get to the top of the hill, and for the next phase of Miho's plan, her first use of asymmetric warfare in this battle comes into play. Oarai's Hetzer, which I'm sure as many of you know, was technically a tank destroyer rather than a proper tank, is very well equipped for ambushes, due to its low profile and overall small size, so it lies in wait. And the student council soon gets to work harassing the Kuromoromine column, focusing on taking out tank tracks, due to probably not trusting their vehicle's ability to score kills from their position. I know some people think they could have done so with side hits here, particularly on Maho's tank in the lead, which would have made a much less exciting battle, of course, but even if it could have worked, It makes sense that they wouldn't want to risk that, since they might not have been confident they'd be able to score a kill shot on a tank as heavy as a Tiger 1. Setting that aside, tracking a tank in the middle of the column wound up causing a bit more of a disruption, which allowed them a second similar hit, as the tank behind slowed to maneuver around the first disabled one. And like any good harassing ambush troops, Turtle Team also knew when the jig was up, and it was time to get out of dodge. They did their job of delaying the enemy, and on the other side, Maho was too smart to waste time and resources chasing after them here as they fall back. Now Oarai holds the top of the hill, and the advantage, firing down on the Kuromoromine tanks as they try to ascend and surround Oarai. Due to the slope and the general uneven nature of the terrain, Kuromorimine's tanks are, at first, unable to effectively fire back as they move, which allows Oarai to score a couple of kills. Utilizing terrain to one's advantage is always key in battle, but especially so against a stronger foe, and that is seen here. But like most advantages, it can only last for so long, as Maho orders one of her heaviest tanks to the front to bear the brunt of the assault, and several of her tanks finally reach a point where they can effectively fire on Oarai's position as others close the circle. Just like Maho, however, Miho is able to clearly see what's going on, and she knows that it's time to abandon this position. Of course, charging straight down with all those big guns pointed at you is not exactly ideal, so she employs chaos again. The tiny Hector charging straight into the enemy formation might seem suicidal, but as Anzu herself mentions, it is safer than it seems. This is largely because operating in such close quarters can make it very difficult for the larger tanks to orient their cannons on such a small and relatively mobile target as the Hetzer. Not to mention they have to beware the risk of friendly fire. It doesn't leave the Hetzer too many opportunities for attack either, since they'll need to be very careful not to maneuver into a spot where they can be hit, but it sure causes some chaos in the Kuromorimine ranks, which lets Oarai take out another tank as they make an opening and begin their breakout. Interestingly, Miho somewhat mirrors Maho here in using her team's heaviest tank to protect the others during the descent. With some more smoke to cover the retreat, Oarai makes a clean getaway, as Maho orders her forces to reorganize. It's worth noting here that all the tactics used so far are, in essence, pretty simple and basic, but simple often works very well. A tactical strategy becomes quote-unquote basic due to it being used a lot, and it's used a lot because it's effective. In the aftermath of this breakout, Erika is again denied a major impact on the battle due to her tank's tracks coming off, reminding us of another drawback of some of these big, heavy tanks. It's also a nice touch during this battle to have the occasional cutaways to other commanders, specifically Kei and Darjeeling, who provide some extra bits of information via their commentary about things like Kuromorimine struggling when the game plan is disrupted, or the note about heavy tanks, which are primarily aimed at viewers less familiar with tank warfare, and also just to provide some extra context for the things going on. Then we get to the pivotal scene at the river, where, despite arranging their tanks in a way to try and protect the lighter ones from the current, Rabbit Team's engine stalls out. I talked more about the importance of this scene in the last video, where I focused on the battle's storytelling aspects, so I won't get into that here. What is worth getting into here, though, is the conundrum this poses for a commander in a similar situation. Is it worth risking the rest of her unit and the success of the mission to attempt to rescue one of her tanks? There's probably no objectively right answer here, as there are too many factors involved in such a decision. However, Miho's determination to help out Rabbit Team will wind up paying dividends later. Also, considering how few tanks she already had at this point, it was probably worth the risk. The covering fire during the rescue is a nice touch as well. Another of those little simple things that are easy to overlook, but always relevant. Meanwhile, Turtle Team is again trying to carry out some harassment as further cover for the rest of the team. But it fails, largely due to Maho's unparalleled situational awareness, though the Student Council does serve as a brief distraction. This point is truly where the first phase of the battle concludes, as Oarai fully withdraws from this battlefield. Maho, unsurprisingly, has a good idea where they're headed, though. All told, Oarai arguably came out the winner, quote-unquote, of this phase of the battle, both by simply surviving and by taking out more tanks than they lost before retreating to a position better suited for their battle plan. Erika doesn't quite understand this, but fortunately for Kuromorimine, Maho does, and she's planned ahead. After taking another nod from historical warfare by collapsing the bridge behind their retreat, Oarai now moves into the town. Unaware, of course, of the enemy tanks waiting for them there. They soon spot the enemy scout/bait, Panzer III, and, thinking it's alone, a classic blunder, they go after it. After all, it is the rare Kuromorimine tank that Oarai's squad should be able to easily deal with. And it's alone. Or is it? It's also kind of fitting here that after utilizing small tanks to bait the enemy earlier in the battle, Oarai here basically falls for the same thing, as the tide of the battle shifts. It's a nice little nod to how similar both Miho and Maho are, despite their obvious differences in many other ways. It's a great entrance for the mouse here, almost treating it like a kaiju, though the moment where it tries to turn its cannon only to hit the wall because of just how big the tank is a bit funny, and I'm sure it's a relatable moment for at least some tankers out there, whether current or past. Miho, of course, knows immediately how bad this is, between just being tank knowledgeable and having been a Kuromoromine student herself, and she immediately orders a withdrawal as the mouse takes its first shot, which, luckily, misses. But that luck doesn't hold for long, as Mallard team, very unwisely, decide to directly engage the mouse, though in their defense they were the furthest into the pretty narrow alley, so they may not have even had a chance to retreat in time to avoid a hit. In any case, one point-blank shot completely flips them and takes them out. Don't worry, the girls are fine. And now the mouse is on the attack, with Oarai in a complete, only semi-organized retreat. Not even its biggest tank can almost just scratch the mouse's frontal armor, and Hippo team, after also unwisely trying to take another shot, is eliminated as well as the mouse rampage continues. In the span of just a few moments, the advantage Oarai painstakingly built up over the first phase of the battle is completely destroyed and reversed, with them down to just 5 tanks. The pre-positioned mouse is doing its job perfectly, tearing through Oarai's ranks while also preventing them from setting up any effective ambushes as the rest of Kuromorimine's team, now fully reorganized, advances on the town. So at this point, advantage Kuromoromine, though Maho correctly understands that, in the end, it's just the flag tank that truly matters, as episode 11 concludes. The battle with the mouse continues as episode 12 opens, with the rest of the Kuromoromine team still en route. But, as we soon see, Oarai has, at least for the most part, gotten past the panic phase from the end of episode 11, and they're now, in a more organized fashion, fighting back as they try to come up with a plan to defeat the mouse before they're completely overrun. Fortunately, for as powerful as the mouse is, it is quite slow, and slow to fire, and, most likely, has limited vision for the crew while they're buttoned up. Miho's first attempt at disabling it, by directing her tanks to try and hit and damage its gun barrel, doesn't accomplish much. But during this, the mouse's escort/spotter, the Panzer III, gets a little overconfident while showboating behind the mouse, exposing herself and getting immediately taken out. This might not have seemed like a huge deal at first, since the Panzer III isn't a particularly powerful tank, but its absence leaves the mouse without any support, which will make Oarai's upcoming plan possible. With time running out, they need to think and act fast, when an idea comes to Miho thanks to her crew. If they can't get through the mouse's armor in a conventional sense, they need to find a different way to engage it. Fortunately, Oarai's teamwork is good enough by this point for them to pull it off. As I'm sure we remember, this iconic scene features the plan that entails getting the turtle team's hetzer under the front of the mouse, partially immobilizing it, while other tanks bait the ball turret into turning, which in turn, pun intended, lets Duck Team get on top and keep the turret from moving further, as Anglerfish Team got onto a high enough incline to fire at the mouse from above, and take it out via its weaker armored top at the vent above its engine block. This plan does wind up knocking out Turtle Team as, while their tank, thanks to that special carbon coating, was able to survive being under the dog pile, still sustained too much damage to carry on. But it's a worthy sacrifice to take out the mouse. This plan deserves a bit more attention, since, as I believe some have pointed out, Oarai quite possibly had enough firepower to get through the mouse's side armor, or to at least mangle its tracks enough to effectively take it out of the fight. The plan they went with is obviously more fun visually, but it's also worth remembering that they didn't have a lot of time to think, so they went with the first, somewhat viable plan, one which they were confident, if it succeeded, would knock the thing out completely. Also, as to why the mouse didn't just back up to get away from the hetzer, the crew was visibly distracted as it got swarmed by all of Oarai's smaller tanks. Plus, the hetzer would have been able to still advance, at least as fast as the mouse could reverse, so it wouldn't get away that easily, and the Panzer IV would have still been able to get into a position to make the kill shot. After this, Oarai is down to just 4 tanks against 14, but the mouse being gone gives them some time to prepare for the final showdown. Fortunately, as we mentioned before, all that matters is the flag. And as we're soon told here, they're going all in on the plan to set up a duel between Miho and Maho. They're going to have to distract and split up the opposing force in the urban environment. Miho has a specific role in mind for Leopon team, as we'll see later, but she trusts her teammates enough to let the other 2 remaining tanks act more or less independently. This is a sign of both a good commander and, of course, good subordinates, as you need a certain high level of confidence in both directions for something like this to work. It also confirms that this final part at least, was Miho's plan from the start, and that the teams extensively prepared ahead of time, giving not just Miho, but all of Oarai's tank commanders excellent understanding of the town in which they're operating, While I'm sure on the other side, Maho was similarly well prepared, I wouldn't be shocked if several of the more overconfident Kuromoromine tank commanders weren't quite so diligent. And with things as precarious as they can be in battles, that can make all the difference. Oarai's plan is put into action and carried out as intended, with the teams remaining in communication and coordination as they lead the Kuromoromine tanks through the urban maze, something that visibly frustrates Erika, unsurprisingly, and certainly some others, which is just what Oarai needs here. As 3 of Oarai's tanks lead the main chase, Rabbit Team, which had hidden further back, makes their move, going after the very powerful and well-armored, but also very slow and less maneuverable enemy rearguard. Drawing on their Kelly's Heroes inspiration, their smaller, faster tank outmaneuvers the enemy elephant, and thanks to Saki helping determine what to target, they take it out from behind. Then, as they sacrifice their own tank, they also eliminate the Yag Tiger, ensuring that they're out of the action, and thus, when Leopan Team moves into position later, that they're able to hold out for longer. Duck Team, unlike Rabbit Team, has zero chance of taking out any enemy tanks, but they can annoy the heck out of them and draw their attention, which they do until they, too, are eventually knocked out, leaving us with only the 2 components for the final stratagem, Anglerfish and Leopan. Once Miho enters the abandoned high school with Maho hot on her heels, Leopan moves into position and becomes an obstacle, a massive obstacle, preventing any reinforcements from getting to Maho, setting up the final duel. Now, there are certainly some things that one could ask here, and it again touches on a larger topic, the myth of plot armor, one that's relevant not just to Girls Und Panzer, but beyond, and which will need its own dedicated video at some point in the future. The discussion of plot armor arises as relevant to character choices made during the action. Here, the fact that Maho, leading her forces from the front, is at the lead, right behind Miho as she enters the high school, I don't think anyone could question at all. The questions arise regarding what happens afterward, such as why she didn't try to escape upon realizing the trap, or why she didn't simply try to stall until backup arrived. As I see it, the reasons are simple. Trying to escape would mean going through Leopan Team, literally, and trying that would put Maho and her tiger in a relatively vulnerable, static position, so that wouldn't be a viable option for her. As for not waiting, the Nishizumi style she adheres to doesn't like the sort of stalling action that would be required here, and as Maho says directly in the scene, it allows no retreat. But more so I think her sense of honor, understanding the personal nature of this battle, plus, more than likely, a sense of respect for Miho, compelled her to accept the challenge of a duel. So, as Leopan does the classic move of holding the choke point outside, first with its cannon and then with its body after it gets knocked out, the duel commences. There isn't a whole lot for me to say analysis-wise regarding the duel itself without getting into a play-by-play that'll make this already long video much longer without adding too much. But there are some neat touches here in terms of the actions taken by the Nishizumis. One of these is Maho's use of high explosive shells to blow out portions of a building to create debris, blocking a pathway in an attempt to corner Miho. There's also a lot of skillful maneuvering, which speaks to both commanders' connections with her crew, as they try to land a killing blow, with each tank trying to get that shot in while staying out of the other's line of fire, something which at times required getting very close. And while the speeds here are obviously faster than in historical battles, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some real urban tank duels used as references for this. Eventually they wind up back where the duel began, and, hearing that Leopan is eliminated, and hearing that Kuromoromine reinforcements are slowly forcing their way past, Miho knows she's out of time. So the only option left is the risky play they tried, and failed, to pull off against Darjeeling way back in the season's first battle. Knowing that they need to be as close as possible for the greatest chance that their shot will knock out the tiger, they go for it. Sure, they'll lose the tracks and be largely immobile afterward, but that doesn't matter, since that won't automatically eliminate a tank. So it'll be enough. You need the highest risk for the greatest reward. Those tracks do snap in the maneuver, of course, but it works. And while the tank is severely banged up, it's Maho's that got its white flag raised. A photo finish for the finals, as you would hope as a fan of the sport. All in all, this was, obviously, the most exciting and well-fought battle, not to mention the longest, of the show to this point. In particular, Oarai's teams utilized literally everything they had, every trick they could come up with, and managed to prevail against a team who came in heavily favored. That's not to say Kuromoromine through the match, obviously. They fought very well too, Maho in particular, but due to a range of factors, they came up just short. And considering Miho was intimately familiar with how their school did things, and the rigidness of their style, it really isn't all that shocking that Miho was able to work out ways to counter that. Though Oarai, of course, still had to work very hard to execute the plan. This battle also really showed that the showrunners could pull off even larger-scaled, more tactically complex battles than we'd seen previously, priming us for the amazing action to come in their film and beyond. Although, if the show had ended with Season 1, this battle would have been a more than satisfying finale action set piece. What did you think of this battle? Is there anything you think I missed that I could have mentioned or delved deeper into? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support me in what I do here, my books and light novels are all available on Amazon. And you can get early access to videos, sneak peeks and updates on my upcoming manga and other projects by subscribing over on Patreon. I also offer channel memberships, which gave access to monthly members-only watch-along streams, during which I'm currently watching for the first time Space Battleship Yamato. And hopefully we'll get back now to the usual every other week video schedule for the foreseeable future. And as always, if you have any thoughts on this video or just anything Girls Und Panzer related you'd like me to talk about, definitely share them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them, and while I might not get to respond to every comment, at least not in a timely manner, I can guarantee that I read each of them. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any future uploads. That's all for now, so until next time.